Wanted CEO discovers dying female cop on the street, and in that one moment, everything explodes. A man on the run, hated, hunted, and out of options, comes face to face with a wounded officer fighting for her last breath. He tries to save her, but the second he lifts her, her body cam switches on and streams him to the entire city. In minutes, everyone believes he attacked her. But then, right before she stops breathing, the cop uses her final breath to whisper something no one expected, a truth that could destroy powerful people and flip the whole city upside down. And when the raw footage leaks, it reveals something far darker than a simple street attack. Now the whole city is divided, dangerous men are closing in, and one innocent man is caught in the middle of a war he never asked for. So what really happened in that alley? And who is the city supposed to believe when the truth could cost someone their life? Tell me in the comments where you're watching from right now, and if this story speaks to you, make sure you hit subscribe so you don't miss the next one. The bitter wind whipped through the city streets, cutting through James Caldwell's thin jacket like icy daggers. He huddled deeper into the worn fabric, his shoulders hunched against the cold as he shuffled forward in the soup kitchen line. The steam rising from the large metal pots offered a brief promise of warmth, a stark contrast to the freezing winter night. His fingers, red and stiff from the cold, clutched the plastic tray as he inched forward. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting harsh shadows across faces that carefully avoided eye contact. James kept his head down, letting his long, unwashed hair fall forward to shield his features. Even after weeks on the run, he couldn't shake the fear that someone might recognize him from the news headlines that had destroyed his life. The smell of vegetable soup and day-old bread brought back memories that made his throat tight. Sunday dinners at his grandmother's house, her small kitchen filled with the aroma of home-cooked meals and the sound of her humming old hymns. She had raised him with such hope, such pride in the man he was becoming. James's chest ached as he remembered her beaming face at his college graduation, the tears in her eyes when he became CEO of his tech company at just 32 years old. "Next," called the volunteer behind the counter, her voice tired but kind. James stepped forward, accepting a bowl of soup and 2 slices of bread with a quiet, "Thank you." Finding a corner spot at one of the long tables, he sat with his back to the wall, an old habit he'd developed since the accusations had surfaced. The soup was watery but hot, and he ate slowly, savoring each spoonful. 6 months ago, he had been dining in 5-star restaurants, leading board meetings, building a company that was changing lives. Now he was grateful for a foam bowl of soup and a place to sit for 30 minutes, without looking over his shoulder. The embezzlement charges had come out of nowhere. James closed his eyes, remembering the morning everything fell apart. The federal agents in his office, the evidence that seemed so real but wasn't his, the look of betrayal on his employees' faces. Someone had set him up perfectly, framing him so thoroughly that even his best lawyers couldn't find a crack in the case. His grandmother hadn't lived to see his fall from grace. Maybe that was a blessing. But he could imagine her disappointment. By 10 o'clock, the soup kitchen was clearing out. James waited until most people had left before slipping back into the night. The temperature had dropped even further, and his breath came out in white puffs as he walked quickly through the empty streets. His feet carried him automatically, choosing the darker paths, the ones where security cameras were less likely to catch his face. Near an old hardware store, its windows dark and its sign faded, James turned down an alley he often used as a shortcut. The smell of garbage and wet cardboard filled the narrow space, and his footsteps echoed softly between the brick walls. He was halfway through when he heard it, a sound so faint he almost missed it. A moan, barely more than a whisper, came from behind a dumpster. James froze, his heart pounding. Every instinct told him to keep walking, to avoid any situation that might draw attention. But then he heard it again, weaker this time, followed by a rattling breath that made his skin prickle. Moving cautiously, James approached the dumpster. In the dim light filtering down from a security lamp, he saw her, Officer Iris Brooks. He recognized her immediately. She was known throughout the neighborhood for her gentle approach with troubled kids, her warm smile, the way she would stop to talk to the homeless instead of shooing them away. Now she was slumped against the dirty metal, her dark uniform darker still with what James realized with horror was blood. "Officer Brooks?" he whispered, dropping to his knees beside her. Her eyes fluttered open, unfocused at first, then finding his face. "Help," she managed, her voice barely audible. "Please." James's hands shook as he assessed her condition. There was a gunshot wound in her abdomen, blood seeping steadily between her fingers where she pressed weakly against it. Her skin was clammy, her breathing shallow and irregular. She needed immediate medical attention, but calling for help would mean exposing himself, ending his chances of ever clearing his name. His grandmother's voice echoed in his memory. "Sometimes doing the right thing costs everything, James, but doing wrong costs even more." With gentle movements, James lifted Officer Brooks's upper body, cradling her against his chest to keep her from the frozen ground. Her blood was warm against his hands, a terrifying contrast to her rapidly cooling skin. She was so young, probably in her late 20s, with features that even in pain held traces of kindness. "Stay with me," he urged, his voice hoarse. "I'm here. You're not alone." Her eyes, bright with pain and fear, found his face again. Her trembling fingers reached up, brushing against his jacket with desperate weakness. "Please," she whispered, each word a struggle. "Don't let me die alone." James held her closer, his own eyes burning with tears as he felt her shaking in his arms. The night pressed in around them, the distant sound of traffic, a reminder of a world that continued to move, while here, in this dark alley, time seemed to stand still. Officer Iris Brooks's fingers clutched weakly at his jacket, her touch a silent plea for comfort in what might be her final moments. In that instant, James felt the weight of every choice that had led him to this moment, the career he'd lost, the life he'd been forced to abandon, and now this, a dying officer in his arms, trusting him with her last breaths, not knowing he was the man whose face was plastered on wanted posters across the city. James's arms trembled as he gathered Officer Brooks closer, trying to distribute her weight evenly. The cold air bit at his exposed skin, but her blood felt warm against his chest, too warm, spreading too quickly. Her head lolled against his shoulder as he struggled to his feet. "I'm going to get you help," he whispered, his voice rough with emotion. "Just stay with me." Her only response was a weak moan that sent fear coursing through him. The main street wasn't far, maybe 200 feet away. He'd seen ambulances use it as a regular route between the hospital and the rougher parts of town. If he could just get her there. James took his first stumbling steps, trying to move as smoothly as possible. Each jarring motion drew a pained gasp from Officer Brooks, and he murmured quiet apologies with every step. Her weight, though she wasn't a large woman, felt immense as he worked to keep her steady. Unknown to James, a small red light blinked to life on Officer Brooks's body camera. The department had just upgraded their equipment with new firmware the week before, a public safety feature that automatically activated live streaming in cases of severe officer distress. Within seconds, the feed began broadcasting across the city. On thousands of phones, tablets, and television screens, the scene appeared without context. A disheveled man with wild hair and ragged clothes hunched over a wounded police officer, her uniform dark with blood. The camera angle, bouncing with each of James's steps, caught his face in harsh shadows that made him look menacing. Social media exploded. Hashtags appeared and multiplied. Officer down, cop killer, Caldwell strikes again. Comments flooded in by the hundreds, then thousands. That's James Caldwell, the fugitive CEO. He's killing her! Someone help! Where are the police? She's dying! The city erupted in digital panic as more people tuned in to the live stream. News stations picked up the feed, running it alongside James's mugshot. The narrative spread like wildfire. James Caldwell, wanted embezzler, caught in the act of attacking a beloved community police officer. But in the alley, James remained focused solely on saving Iris's life. Each step was a battle against exhaustion and the slick blood that made his grip uncertain. His breath came in harsh pants, creating clouds in the frigid air. Almost there, he encouraged, though he wasn't sure if she could still hear him. Just hold on. Officer Brooks coughed suddenly, violently. Her whole body convulsed in his arms, and James had to stop, bracing himself against a wall to keep from dropping her. Blood flecked her lips, and her eyes flew open, filled with a desperate clarity. With strength that seemed to come from nowhere, she lifted her head. Her gaze fixed on her body camera, something James hadn't even noticed, and she spoke with surprising firmness. "He didn't hurt me." Her voice, though weak, was clear and determined. "He saved me." The words broadcast across the city, causing a moment of confused silence in the digital chaos. Before anyone could process this development, her energy seemed to fade as quickly as it had come. Her head dropped back against James's shoulder, her breathing becoming more labored. Sirens wailed in the distance, their sound bouncing off the buildings and seeming to come from every direction at once. James's heart pounded. Every instinct screamed at him to run, to save himself, to not throw away his last chance at proving his innocence. But Officer Brooks's fingers were still tangled in his jacket, holding on with what little strength she had left. Her breath came in ragged gasps now, each one seeming more difficult than the last. The blood had soaked through both their clothes, and James could feel her growing colder despite the exertion of carrying her. The sirens grew louder, more insistent, echoing through the empty streets. Officer Brooks shuddered in his arms, a small sound escaping her that might have been words or might have been just pain. Her grip on his jacket remained, though, a silent plea that spoke louder than any words could have. "Don't let me die alone." The promise he'd made in the alley held him there, even as the sirens drew closer and closer. James stood at the edge of the alley, Iris Brooks cradled in his arms, her life slipping away with each passing second. The streetlights cast long shadows across them both as her labored breathing filled the space between heartbeats. The approaching sirens screamed their warning of what was coming, but still she held on to his jacket with failing strength, and still he held on to her. James's legs trembled with exhaustion as he carefully lowered himself and Iris to the cold ground. The rough concrete scraped against his knees, but he barely noticed, focused entirely on keeping her head supported. The street lamp cast harsh shadows across her face, highlighting how pale she'd become. Iris's eyes fluttered, and her lips moved with desperate urgency. James leaned closer, straining to hear her whispered words. "Don't let them hide the truth." Her voice was barely audible, a thread of sound in the freezing night air. "Promise me." Before James could respond, her body went completely slack in his arms. The sudden dead weight made his heart skip a beat. "Officer Brooks." His voice cracked as panic seized him. "Iris?" James pressed trembling fingers against her neck, searching for a pulse. Nothing. He tried again, desperation making his movements clumsy. Her hand, which had been clutching his jacket so tightly just moments before, slipped free and fell with a soft thud against the pavement. At that precise moment, the live stream feed stuttered. Digital artifacts corrupted the image, as network congestion caused the stream to buffer. When it resumed, it replayed the last few seconds in complete silence, showing only James kneeling over Iris's still form, his hands at her throat, her arm falling limply to the ground. Across the city, millions of viewers watched in horror. Without audio, without context, the scene appeared damning. Social media exploded with renewed outrage. He just killed her! Did anyone else see that? Monster! The police department's servers strained under the unprecedented viewership, their technicians scrambling to gain control of the broadcast. But before they could intervene, the camera continued recording, capturing new sounds that cut through the night's silence. Footsteps, heavy boots on concrete, approaching from deeper in the alley. James's survival instincts kicked in. He gently laid Iris's body down and slid behind the dumpster, pressing himself against the grimy metal. The stench of rotting garbage nearly made him gag, but he remained perfectly still as two men walked into view. They wore black masks and expensive-looking winter coats, a stark contrast to the usual criminal element in this neighborhood. One was notably taller than the other, but both moved with the practiced efficiency of professionals. "Damn it," the shorter one grumbled, looking down at Iris's body. "The mayor won't like that she lived this long. Should have been a clean hit." The taller man kicked the wall in frustration. "How was I supposed to know she had some kind of dead man's switch on her body cam? The syndicate's going to be pissed if this brings heat on the construction contracts." She had too many questions about those bid riggings, getting nosy about where all that money was really going. "Yeah, well, Merrick made it clear. Anyone digging into the connections between City Hall and our operations needs to disappear. Fast and quiet." The taller man spat on the ground. This was neither. James barely dared to breathe. Every word was being broadcast to the entire city. He watched through a gap between the dumpster and wall as the shorter man pulled out a phone. "We need to call it in. Mayor's going to want damage control started immediately." He paused, looking down at Iris again. Shame, really. Heard she was one of the good ones. Actually cared about cleaning up this neighborhood. "That's exactly why she had to go," his partner replied coldly. "Can't have honest cops asking questions about dishonest money." A sudden burst of radio chatter in the distance made both men tense. The wail of sirens, which had been background noise before, was getting closer, much closer. "Time to go," the taller one said. "Let the mayor's PR team earn their paychecks on this mess." Their footsteps retreated quickly, boots crunching on scattered gravel until they disappeared around a corner. James waited several more seconds, heart pounding so hard he was sure it must be audible on the live stream. The sirens were nearly deafening now. Red and blue lights began to strobe against the alley walls as police cars approached from multiple directions. Shouts echoed between buildings as officers coordinated their response. "Sector 3, seal off Monroe Street! Get those barricades up on Washington. All units converge on the location." James took one last look at Iris's body, at the woman who had used her final moments to try to clear his name and expose the truth that had gotten her killed. "I promise," he whispered, though he knew she couldn't hear him anymore. Then he turned and ran deeper into the maze of alleys, away from the approaching sirens and shouts. His footsteps splashed through puddles and echoed off brick walls as he fled into the darkness, leaving behind the scene that would soon be swarming with police. The body camera continued to record, its lens pointed at the night sky, broadcasting empty silence to a city that would never be the same after what it had witnessed. James's lungs burned as he sprinted through the maze of back streets, his worn shoes slapping against wet pavement. The bitter winter wind whipped at his face. But he couldn't slow down. Not now. Not with the echoes of sirens growing louder behind him. Left turn. Right turn. through a narrow passage between buildings. His body moved on autopilot, letting survival instincts guide him away from the chaos. After 10 minutes of hard running, his legs finally gave out beneath the Johnson Street Bridge, a forgotten piece of infrastructure on the city's east side. He collapsed against one of the concrete supports, chest heaving as he tried to catch his breath. The bridge's shadow offered some cover while providing a distant view of the crime scene. Red and blue lights painted the night sky several blocks away, reflecting off low-hanging clouds. More emergency vehicles kept arriving, police cruisers, ambulances, crime scene units. Their sirens created a symphony of urgency that carried across the empty streets. James pulled his knees to his chest, trying to make himself smaller as a police helicopter swept overhead. Its searchlight carved through the darkness, but didn't dip low enough to spot him. The metal support beam felt ice-cold against his back, sending shivers through his already trembling body. "I'm sorry," he whispered, though Iris couldn't hear him anymore. "I'm so sorry I couldn't save you." His breath came out in visible puffs of vapor. The temperature had dropped even further, but he barely noticed the cold. His mind kept replaying those final moments, her whispered plea, the stillness that followed, those masked men discussing her murder so casually. The corruption went all the way to the mayor's office. How deep did this conspiracy run? An electronic billboard caught his attention, its harsh LED glow cutting through the night. The regular advertisements suddenly switched to a breaking news alert. James's stomach clenched as his own face filled the massive screen, an old corporate headshot from better days when his hair was neatly trimmed and his clothes were expensive. Below it, bold text scrolled. "Breaking news, murder suspect in cop killing, James Caldwell, disgraced tech CEO, wanted for questioning in death of Officer Iris Brooks." "No!" The word burst from him as he slammed his fist into the frozen ground. Pain shot through his hand, but he barely registered it. They were already spinning their narrative, trying to pin Iris's death on him. Of course they would. He was the perfect scapegoat. An alleged embezzler on the run, desperate and dangerous. He forced himself to look at the news ticker continuing to scroll beneath his photo. The story was everywhere now, consuming every channel and social media platform. But the public reaction wasn't uniform. While many called for his immediate arrest, others urged caution. Fragments of Iris's final words had made it through before the live stream glitched, her voice clearly stating he hadn't hurt her, that he had tried to save her. The city was divided, but division meant doubt, and doubt meant hope. James pulled himself to his feet, wincing at his stiff muscles. He couldn't stay here. The warehouse. He needed to get to the warehouse. It was the closest thing to a safe house he had left. The journey took nearly an hour as he stuck to shadows and back alleys, doubling back several times to ensure he wasn't being followed. The abandoned textile factory loomed ahead of him, its broken windows like dark eyes staring out at the city. He'd discovered it weeks ago when he first went on the run. The security was minimal, just a rusty chain on the delivery entrance that was easy enough to slip past if you knew how. Inside, the air was stale and thick with dust. Moonlight filtered through holes in the roof, creating pools of dim light between the ancient machinery. James made his way to the former foreman's office on the second floor, where he'd stashed some emergency supplies. His hands trembled slightly as he pulled out the old flip phone from beneath a loose floorboard. He'd kept it charged but turned off, saving it for an absolute emergency. If this didn't qualify, nothing did. The screen's pale blue light illuminated his face as he powered it on. He only had one number saved in its memory, Sergeant Marion Hayes. They'd met 3 years ago at a police charity gala his company had sponsored. She'd impressed him with her direct manner and unwavering integrity. More importantly, she had been Iris's mentor and friend. James's thumb hovered over the keypad. Would she even read a message from him? The news was painting him as Iris's killer. What if Hayes believed them? But Iris's final words echoed in his mind. Don't let them hide the truth. Promise me. He began typing. Sergeant Hayes, this is James Caldwell. Iris was shot investigating corruption connecting City Hall to organized crime. Her body cam caught the killers confessing. I tried to save her. She asked me to protect the truth. I know you probably hate me, but please, check the full live stream footage. For Iris, if you believe me, I need your help. James read the message 3 times, checking for any mistakes. This might be his only chance to reach someone who could help expose the truth. His finger trembled as it hovered over the send button. Please, he whispered. Please don't let them have gotten to you, too. He pressed send. The phone showed the message transmitting, then delivered. Now all he could do was wait and hope that somewhere in this corrupt city there was still someone willing to listen to the truth. Sergeant Marion Hayes sat alone in her patrol car, the blue glow of multiple screens casting shadows across her weathered face. The dashboard-mounted tablet displayed an endless stream of social media updates about Iris's death, while the car's main computer flashed urgent police bulletins. On her personal phone, text messages from fellow officers poured in, offering condolences, demanding answers, calling for justice. She couldn't bring herself to respond to any of them. The radio crackled with constant chatter as units coordinated their search for James Caldwell. Marion reached out with trembling fingers and turned the volume down, needing a moment of quiet to process her grief. Iris's face filled her mind, bright, determined, full of purpose. Just yesterday morning, they'd shared coffee in this very car, Iris excitedly telling her about a breakthrough in her investigation. Now she was gone. I should have known something was wrong, Marion whispered to herself, her voice thick with emotion. Should have checked on her when she missed check-in. Her phone buzzed again, but this time it wasn't another condolence message. The number was unfamiliar. Marion's eyes widened as she read James Caldwell's desperate words about corruption, City Hall, and Iris's final moments. The nerve of this man! She growled, her first instinct to call in his location immediately. Her finger hovered over the radio button, ready to alert all units. But something held her back. On the tablet, a news channel replayed the fragmented live stream footage for the 100th time. Marion forced herself to watch again, focusing on Iris's face, her lips moving weakly. He didn't hurt me. He saved me. The words haunted her. They didn't fit the narrative being pushed by the media and her superiors. If Caldwell had attacked Iris, why would she use her dying breath to defend him? For an hour, Marion sat in her car, wrestling with her conscience. The sky began to lighten, the first hints of dawn painting the city in shades of grey. Every instinct from her 25 years on the force told her to bring Caldwell in. But Iris's voice kept echoing in her head. "What were you trying to tell us, baby girl?" she murmured, touching the screen where Iris's face froze in mid-sentence. Making her decision, Marion started the car. She knew the warehouse district well. It was part of her regular patrol route. The address in Caldwell's message brought her to an abandoned textile factory, its hollow windows staring down at her like accusing eyes. She parked in the shadows and drew her weapon, approaching cautiously. Even if she believed Caldwell might be innocent, she wasn't about to take unnecessary risks. The chain on the delivery entrance hung loose, and she slipped inside, her flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. "Caldwell!" she called out, her voice echoing off bare walls. "This is Sergeant Hayes. Show yourself. Slowly." For a long moment, nothing moved. Then she heard footsteps above, and James emerged at the top of a metal staircase. His appearance shocked her. This was not the polished CEO from the charity gala 3 years ago. His clothes were worn, his face gaunt, his eyes haunted. "Keep your hands where I can see them," she ordered, training her light on him as he descended the stairs. He complied, moving with the careful deliberation of someone who knew one wrong move could be fatal. "Thank you for coming," he said, his voice hoarse. "I didn't know who else to trust." "I haven't decided if you can trust me yet," Marion replied sharply. "And I definitely haven't decided if I can trust you. Start talking." James's story spilled out in a rush, finding Iris in the alley, trying to save her, hearing the masked men return and confess their connection to City Hall. His hands shook as he described Iris's final moments, and Marion saw genuine pain in his eyes. "She knew something big," he finished. "Something worth killing for. She made me promise not to let them hide the truth." "Where's your proof?" Marion demanded, though her weapon had lowered slightly. "The live stream cut out before those men appeared. It's your word against the official story." "I don't have proof," James admitted, his shoulders slumping. "Just what I heard, and Iris's last words on camera. But you knew her, Sergeant. You trained her. Would she lie with her dying breath?" The question hit Marion like a physical blow. No, Iris wouldn't lie. Not about something this important. She had been the most honest person Marion had ever met, sometimes to a fault. The silence stretched between them, heavy with uncertainty. Finally, Marion holstered her weapon. "I'm not arresting you," she said slowly. "Not yet. But I'm not letting you out of my sight either. I have a place where you can lay low while I check out your story." "Where?" James asked, wariness evident in his stance. "My husband's old hunting cabin, about 40 miles outside the city. Nobody's used it since he passed 5 years ago." Marion pulled out her car keys. "You've got 1 night to convince me you're telling the truth. After that, I do what my badge requires. Understood?" James nodded, relief and gratitude washing over his features. "Understood. Thank you, Sergeant." "Don't thank me yet," Marion warned, leading him toward the exit. "I'm still not sure if I'm doing the right thing or making the biggest mistake of my career." They slipped out of the warehouse just as the sun breached the horizon, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. Marion's cruiser was hidden in shadow, and she gestured for James to get in the back, where the windows were tinted. As they pulled away from the warehouse, Marion glanced in her rearview mirror at the man huddled in her back seat. Was she really going to risk everything? Her career, her reputation, possibly even her freedom, on the word of a fugitive? Iris's face flashed through her mind again, along with all the times they'd discussed corruption in the department, all the cases that had mysteriously disappeared, all the questions that had gone unanswered. Maybe it was time someone finally started demanding those answers. The morning sun crept through dusty windows, casting long shadows across the cabin's worn floorboards. James stirred on the lumpy couch, his muscles protesting after weeks of sleeping rough. The blanket Marion had given him smelled faintly of cedar and thyme, like memories locked away and forgotten. He sat up slowly, taking in his surroundings in the daylight. The cabin was modest but solid, a testament to simpler times. Fishing rods leaned in one corner, their lines tangled with cobwebs. A collection of faded photographs lined the mantel. Younger versions of Marion and a broad-shouldered man with kind eyes smiled out from behind layers of dust. The crunch of tires on gravel announced Marion's return. James tensed instinctively, but forced himself to remain seated. Running now would only confirm guilt in her eyes. The door opened with a groan, and Marion entered, carrying 2 paper bags and a drink carrier with coffee. Her expression was guarded but less hostile than the previous night. "I brought breakfast," she said, setting everything on the kitchen counter. "And a warning, I could still change my mind and call this in at any moment." James nodded, accepting the coffee she handed him. I understand. Thank you for giving me a chance to explain. Start from the beginning, Marian ordered, pulling up a wooden chair. Everything you remember about last night, every detail matters. For the next several hours, James recounted his story while Marian took notes and made calls, speaking in hushed tones to contacts she still trusted. The sun climbed higher, throwing sharp rectangles of light across the cabin floor. The timing doesn't add up, she muttered at one point, comparing her notes to something on her phone. You said you left the soup kitchen around 10 o'clock? Yes, Sister Margaret was closing up early because of the cold. Marian's eyes narrowed. How do you know her name? I've been going there for weeks, James explained. She never asked questions, just smiled and made sure I got extra bread when she could spare it. Marian made another note, then dialed her phone again. James heard a woman's voice answer, and Marian asked careful questions about the soup kitchen's schedule the previous night. After hanging up, she gave James a measured look. Sister Margaret confirms your story, says you've been coming in regularly, always polite, always helped stack chairs before leaving. She paused. It's a small thing, but it matters. Guilty men don't usually help with chairs. As morning turned to afternoon, Marian's phone buzzed constantly with updates from the city. She pulled up news feeds showing crowds gathering downtown, some demanding justice for Iris, others calling for James's arrest. The tension was palpable even through the screen. City's like a powder keg, Marian said, scrolling through footage of protesters facing off against riot police. Iris was well loved in her community. People want answers. James watched the scenes unfold with a sick feeling in his stomach. This is exactly what they want. Everyone fighting each other instead of asking the real questions. The sun was setting when Marian's laptop chimed with an incoming email. The sender was anonymous, but the subject line made her sit up straight. Officer Brooks, Case File 647B. This was Iris's active investigation. Marian breathed, opening the attachment. She was looking into city contracts, following a money trail that didn't make sense. They huddled around the screen, reading through page after page of financial records. Most were heavily redacted, but one document stood out, a series of payments from a company called Meridian Consulting to an offshore account. Wait. James leaned closer. I know that company name. When I was CEO, they tried to partner with us on a city development project. Something felt off about their paperwork, so I turned them down. He paused, realization dawning. A week later, the first embezzlement accusations appeared. Marian was already typing, pulling up business records. Meridian Consulting, registered 3 years ago, primary stakeholder listed as... Her eyes widened. It's a shell company. And look who signed off on their biggest contract. The signature at the bottom of the page was unmistakable. Mayor Franklin Merrick. James sat back, his head spinning. They framed me because I wouldn't play along, and when Iris got too close to proving it, they killed her. Marian finished grimly. She stared at the document for a long moment, then closed her laptop with decisive click. If you're telling the truth, then the people who killed her are the same ones who framed you. We start digging tomorrow. The cabin fell quiet except for the soft tick of an old clock and the whisper of wind through pine trees outside. In that moment, James saw something change in Marian's expression. Doubt giving way to determination, grief hardening into purpose. He thought of Iris's final words, "Don't let them hide the truth." Looking at Marian now, he felt the first real flicker of hope that they might actually keep that promise. The truth was out there, buried in contracts and shell companies, hidden behind masks and political smiles. But with Marian's help, maybe they could finally bring it into the light. The morning sun cast long shadows across the empty parking lot, as Marion's unmarked car pulled up to the Faith and Hope Community Center. The building's red brick facade showed its age, with faded murals of children playing and elderly folks gardening decorating its walls. James hunched down in the passenger seat, adjusting his borrowed baseball cap lower over his eyes. "Remember," Marion said, scanning the area. "You're my nephew Marcus, helping me with community outreach. Keep your head down and let me do the talking." James nodded, tugging at the oversized jacket Marion had found in her late husband's closet. The worn leather still carried a faint smell of pipe tobacco, making him think of his grandmother and simpler times. They walked through the center's front doors, where the sound of piano music drifted from down the hall. Following the melody, they found Miss Robbie in the activity room, her fingers dancing across the keys as she led a small group of seniors in Amazing Grace. Miss Robbie was exactly as Marion had described her, a tall woman in her 70s with silver hair pulled back in a neat bun, her back straight as a ruler despite her years. When the song ended, she noticed them waiting and broke into a warm smile. "Well, if it isn't Sergeant Hayes." She rose from the piano bench, embracing Marion. "Lord knows we need your presence here today." Her sharp eyes flickered to James, but didn't linger, something knowing in her expression. "Miss Robbie," Marion said softly, "could we speak privately?" The choir director nodded, turning to her group. "Take 5, everyone. Mrs. Johnson, why don't you lead them through How Great Thou Art? You know it better than anyone." In Miss Robbie's small office, decorated with decades of choir photos and children's artwork, they sat close together. The window air conditioning unit hummed, masking their conversation from anyone passing by. "I know why you're here," Miss Robbie said, her voice heavy with sorrow. "About our sweet Iris. That child had a heart of gold, always staying late to help the seniors get to their cars, bringing extra food for our homeless ministry." She paused, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. But something was wrong these past few weeks. I could see it in her face. "Tell us what you noticed," Marion prompted gently. Miss Robbie leaned forward, her voice dropping. "She was scared, Sergeant. Not the normal kind of scared you'd expect from a young officer. This was different." She glanced at James again, seemed to make a decision, and continued. 2 Thursdays ago, she came in looking pale as a ghost. I found her in this very office, crying. Said she'd discovered something terrible, something about people in high places doing wrong. James's hands tightened on his chair arms, but he stayed silent as promised. "Did she say who?" Marion asked. "Not directly, but she mentioned city contracts, money that wasn't adding up. Said she'd seen names that scared her, people with real power." Miss Robbie's expression hardened. "And there were men watching her, strange men in dark cars, following her when she left here." Marion pulled out her phone, showing a still image from the body cam footage of the masked men. "Did they look like this?" Miss Robbie adjusted her glasses, studying the image. "Could be. The build is right. They'd park across the street, pretending to read newspapers or check their phones, but they were always watching." "Do you have security cameras outside?" James blurted, earning a sharp look from Marion. But Miss Robbie was already nodding. "Pastor James insisted on them last year after some vandalism. They record to a computer in the maintenance room." She stood, smoothing her skirt. "Follow me." The maintenance room was cramped and smelled of cleaning supplies. An ancient desktop computer sat on a folding table, connected to a series of small monitors showing different angles of the building's exterior. Miss Robbie logged in and began pulling up archived footage. "Iris usually came on Thursdays and Sundays," she explained, clicking through files. "The men started showing up about 3 weeks ago." They spent the next hour reviewing footage, Marion taking notes on times and dates. Sure enough, the same two men appeared repeatedly, always maintaining their distance but clearly monitoring the building. Their faces were never clearly visible, but their movements matched the description of the men James had seen in the alley. "Wait," Marion said suddenly, pointing at a timestamp. "That's during Iris's regular patrol shift in this neighborhood." She pulled out her phone, dialing quickly. "Hey Marcus, I need a favor. Remember that metadata extraction program you developed? I'm sending you some security footage. Need everything you can pull from it. Timestamps, device information, anything embedded." James and Miss Robbie waited in tense silence as Marion stepped into the hallway to talk. Through the door, they could hear her quiet voice providing details to her former partner. Miss Robbie studied James's face. "You're not really her nephew, are you?" James hesitated, then shook his head slightly. "Thought not." She patted his hand. "But you're trying to help find who hurt our Iris, and that's what matters. She always said truth would come to light, even in the darkest times." Marion returned, her expression grim but determined. "Marcus found something. The footage shows the same men here every Thursday and Sunday for 3 weeks, always during Iris's shifts. They knew her schedule, knew her routines." She looked at James, her voice dropping to a whisper. "They were stalking her long before you found her. This wasn't random." The air conditioning unit sputtered, throwing a chill through the small room. Miss Robbie crossed herself, murmuring a quiet prayer. James thought of Iris's final moments, how afraid she must have been in those weeks leading up to it, carrying such a heavy burden alone. The silence was broken by the distant sound of "How Great Thou Art" still drifting from the activity room, the seniors' voices raised in faithful harmony, unaware of the dark truth being uncovered in their midst. The streetlights cast long shadows across the precinct parking lot as Marion's car rolled to a silent stop behind the building. It was just past midnight, and the night shift officers were mostly out on patrol, leaving the administrative section nearly empty. James crouched low in the passenger seat, his heart pounding against his ribs. "Stay close and keep quiet," Marion whispered, checking her watch. "Night cleaning crew just left. We've got maybe 30 minutes before anyone comes through archives again." She pulled out her old access card, technically deactivated after her recent stress leave, but the system hadn't been updated yet. James followed her to a side door, keeping to the shadows. The card reader blinked green, and they slipped inside. The archive smelled of paper and dust, rows of metal filing cabinets stretching into the darkness. Their footsteps echoed softly on the linoleum floor, despite their careful movements. Marion led them through the maze of cabinets toward the back offices where recent cases were processed. "Iris's desk is here," she murmured, gesturing to a neat workstation in the corner. She was thorough, kept both digital and paper copies of everything. James started checking drawers while Marion rifled through the filing cabinet beside the desk. Minutes ticked by in tense silence as they searched, finding nothing but standard reports and routine paperwork. "This isn't right," Marion muttered, frustration evident in her voice. "There should be at least 3 months' worth of investigation files here." She pulled out another drawer, scanning labels. "Everything from September through December is just gone." James ran his fingers along the underside of the desk, feeling for anything unusual. Someone cleaned house. They knew exactly what they were looking for. "Wait." Marion held up a hand, tilting her head. "Do you hear that?" They froze, listening to distant voices approaching from the main hallway. Marion quickly switched off their flashlight, plunging them into darkness broken only by the exit sign's red glow. The voices grew clearer, 2 male officers discussing their dinner plans. James's pulse quickened as their footsteps passed right outside the archive's door, but they continued down the hall, their conversation fading. Once the coast was clear, James resumed his search with trembling fingers. As he felt beneath the last drawer, something caught his attention, a small bump that shouldn't be there. He pressed gently, and a piece of tape gave way, dropping a small object into his palm. "Marion," he whispered urgently, "found something." In the dim light, they examined the flash drive that had been carefully taped under the drawer. It was small and unmarked, exactly the kind of thing that might go unnoticed during a hasty evidence removal. "Smart girl," Marion breathed, pride mixing with sadness in her voice. She knew they might come for her files. They hurried to Iris's computer, powering it on and plugging in the drive. Folders appeared containing dozens of voice memos, each labeled with dates and times. Marion quickly copied them to her phone while James kept watch. They played the most recent recording, and Iris's voice filled their ears, tight with tension but determined. October 15, 11:47 p.m. The invoices don't match the actual work done. Someone's creating fake companies, billing the city for millions in services never rendered. The money's being redirected through the mayor's emergency development fund. But that's just the surface. There's more here. So much more. If anything happens to me, look at the mayor's emergency development fund. The proof is there, hidden in plain sight. The recording ended with a soft click that seemed to echo in the darkness. James and Marion shared a look of grim understanding. They now held proof of exactly why Iris had been targeted. Suddenly, voices returned, much closer this time. Footsteps approached the archives door, followed by the sound of a keycard being swiped. "Quick!" Marion hissed, yanking the flash drive free and shutting down the computer. They barely made it to the emergency exit, easing it open just enough to slip through. The night air hit them like a slap as they darted across the parking lot. Two officers, ones Marion recognized as being close to the mayor, were walking towards the archives entrance, keys jingling. "Down!" she ordered in a harsh whisper, pulling James behind a patrol car. They crouched there, barely breathing, as the officers passed within feet of their hiding spot. Through the car's windows, James could see their reflections in the building's glass doors as they entered the archives. "They're checking the files," Marion whispered. "Someone must have tipped them off." For 5 endless minutes, they remained frozen behind the patrol car, muscles cramping from the awkward position. Finally, the officers emerged, looking frustrated and talking in low voices about nothing new being added. Only when the men had disappeared back into the building did Marion tap James's shoulder, signaling it was safe to move. They crept along the row of parked vehicles, staying low until they reached Marion's car. Once inside with the doors locked, they sat in silence for a moment, processing what they'd found. The flash drive felt heavy in Marion's pocket, a tiny piece of plastic containing the truth Iris had died protecting. "We can't stay here," Marion finally said, starting the car. "They'll check the security cameras eventually. Let's get back to the cabin and see exactly what Iris left us." As they drove away, James watched the precinct disappear in the side mirror, thinking about Iris's voice. So young, so determined, speaking to them from beyond death, still fighting for justice. He made a silent promise to her memory that her final message wouldn't be in vain. The sun crept over the horizon, painting the sky in soft pinks and oranges as Marion's car wound its way through the empty back roads. James slumped against the passenger window, dark circles under his eyes betraying their sleepless night. The flash drive felt like it was burning a hole in Marion's pocket, each bump in the road reminding her of its precious contents. "You should try to rest," Marion said, glancing at James. "We've got a long day ahead." "Can't sleep," James replied, rubbing his eyes. "Keep hearing Iris's voice from those recordings. She knew, Marion. She knew they might kill her, but she kept digging anyway." The cabin appeared through the morning mist, its weathered wood glowing golden in the dawn light. As they pulled up, Marian's phone buzzed with messages from contacts she'd reached out to during their drive, community leaders, church pastors, and retired officers she trusted, all responding to her careful hints about needing support. Inside, James collapsed onto the couch, while Marian made coffee and pulled out some frozen breakfast biscuits. The small TV in the corner caught their attention as a news anchor's voice filled the room. Controversy continues to surround the death of Officer Iris Brooks, with the city deeply divided over James Caldwell's involvement. They watched as footage showed dueling protests outside City Hall. One group held signs reading, "Justice for Iris, find the real killers," and "Caldwell speaks truth." The opposing crowd waved angry banners declaring, "Cop killer," and "No mercy for murderers." "Look at that," Marian said, pointing to the screen. "People are starting to question the official story. Iris's final words on that body cam made an impact." James stared at his coffee, his grandmother's words echoing in his mind. Truth has a way of rising to the surface, like cream in coffee. You just have to give it time and space to float. Marian paced the small kitchen, her tactical mind working. "We need to get ahead of this, control the narrative before they bury Iris's investigation completely." She stopped suddenly, turning to James. "What if we did our own live stream? A town hall, but virtual. We could present the evidence carefully, let people see the real you." "Wouldn't they trace the signal?" James asked. "Not if we do it right. I know someone who can bounce the signal through multiple servers. We'd need to be careful about what background shows in the video, but it could work." They spent the morning reaching out to Marian's trusted contacts, building a network of support. By afternoon, they had commitments from several community leaders to help spread the word about an evening broadcast. "Your grandmother?" Marian said softly as they cleared away lunch dishes. "Tell me about her." Iris mentioned once that she'd met her at that charity event years ago. James's eyes softened. "She raised me after my parents died, worked 3 jobs to put me through college. When my tech company took off, all she said was, 'Remember who you are, James. Success is nothing without integrity.'" He paused, swallowing hard. She would have been heartbroken to see those embezzlement charges, but she would have known they weren't true. As the day progressed, they transformed the cabin's living room into a makeshift studio. Marian's tech contact dropped off equipment, lights, microphones, and a laptop with specialized broadcasting software. They pushed furniture against the walls and hung a plain sheet as a backdrop. James spent hours writing and rewriting his speech, crumpling paper after paper. Finally, as the sun began to set, he looked up at Marian. "I think I've got it." She read over his words, nodding slowly. "This is good, James. It's honest. Raw. People will connect with this." They did several test runs, adjusting the lighting and camera angle to ensure nothing identifiable appeared in the frame. James practiced his delivery, working to keep his voice steady despite his nerves. The speech began with Iris, her kindness, her dedication to truth, her final moments. It continued with his own story, not of the successful CEO, but of the boy raised by a grandmother who taught him about courage and integrity. He included details from Iris's investigation, carefully worded to protect their evidence while making the corruption clear. As night fell, Marian's phone lit up with messages from their supporters, confirming they were ready to share the live stream link across their networks. The cabin grew quiet except for the soft hum of equipment. James stood before the camera, smoothing his borrowed shirt. In his pocket, he held a small photo of his grandmother that he'd managed to keep during his months on the run. Her smile gave him strength. Marian checked the settings one final time, then positioned herself behind the laptop. "You ready?" James took a deep breath, thinking of Iris's final words, of his grandmother's teachings, of all the people who deserved to know the truth. He stepped forward into the light, shoulders straight despite his trembling hands. "Whenever you're ready," he said softly. Marian nodded, her finger hovering over the keyboard. "Going live in 3-2. The morning sun crept through the cabin windows as James adjusted his collar one final time. Marian had helped him clean up, a fresh shave, borrowed clothes, and most importantly, Iris's polished badge pinned carefully to his chest. She'd retrieved it from evidence storage, knowing the symbol would speak volumes. "Streams live," Marian announced quietly from behind the laptop. 10 viewers. 50. 200. She watched the numbers climb rapidly as their network of supporters began sharing the link. James took a deep breath, remembering his grandmother's advice about public speaking. "Just tell the truth, plain and simple. The rest will follow." "Good morning," he began, his voice steady despite his racing heart. "My name is James Caldwell, and I'm here to tell you about Officer Iris Brooks, not just how she died, but how she lived, and what she died trying to expose." The viewer count kept climbing. 1,000, 5,000, 20,000. People were sharing the link across social media, through church groups, senior centers, and youth programs. Comments flooded the chat faster than Marian could track them. "I found Officer Brooks in that alley, wounded but still fighting," James continued. "She wasn't just a badge and uniform. She was a daughter, a friend, and a protector of this city. And in her final moments, she entrusted me with the truth she'd discovered." He gestured to Marian, who played the first of Iris's voice memos. Iris's clear, determined voice filled the cabin. "September 15th. Found another set of inflated contracts. Emergency Development Fund shows $5 million diverted through shell companies. Mayor's signature on all of them. They're watching me now. If anything happens..." The viewer count hit 100,000. Local news stations began picking up the feed. James shared detailed breakdowns of the corruption Iris had uncovered, careful to protect their remaining evidence while making the patterns clear. "Church groups are mobilizing," Marian whispered, checking her phone. "Peaceful protests forming downtown. Senior centers are organizing phone banks to demand investigation." James touched Iris's badge, drawing strength from it. Officer Brooks believed in this city. She believed in justice, and she died because she refused to look the other way when she discovered how deep the corruption went. 200,000 viewers now. Comments poured in from across the city. "We believe you, James. Justice for Iris. The mayor must resign." James shared stories of Iris's community work, her volunteer hours at youth centers, her dedication to building trust between police and citizens. He spoke of his own journey from CEO to fugitive, voice-breaking as he described his grandmother's unwavering faith in his innocence. "Officer Brooks gave her life protecting the truth," he said. "I promised her I wouldn't let that truth die with her. That's why I'm here today, speaking to all of you, knowing the risks but knowing that silence only serves those who..." Suddenly, brilliant white light flooded through the cabin windows. The peaceful morning erupted with the whir of helicopter blades and amplified voices. "This is the Metro Police Task Force. We have the building surrounded. Come out with your hands up!" Marian jumped to her feet, reaching for her service weapon. "They traced us. James, we need to..." More lights blazed through the windows. Heavy boots thundered on the porch steps. The laptop showed over 500,000 viewers watching as chaos erupted. "James Caldwell, Sergeant Hayes, this is your only warning. Exit the building immediately." James looked directly into the camera, Iris's badge gleaming under the harsh lights. "The truth can't be silenced," he began, but the door burst open with a deafening crash. "Hands where we can see them!" Armed officers poured into the cabin, weapons raised, the live stream cut to black. 300 miles away, in a small church basement, Denise Brooks, Iris's mother, watched the screen go dark. She touched her daughter's photo, whispered a prayer, and picked up her phone to make some calls. The truth was out now, and she knew exactly what Iris would want her to do next. But in the cabin, surrounded by raised weapons and shouting voices, James and Marian could only exchange one final look as the morning light caught Iris's badge, still shining despite everything. "On your knees! Now!" The floodlights bleached all color from the room as James and Marian slowly raised their hands. The shouts grew louder as boots thundered through the cabin's front rooms. Marian grabbed James's arm, her fingers digging into his sleeve with urgent strength. Her eyes darted to the tiny back door, barely visible behind stacked boxes and old furniture. "Kitchen, now." Her whisper was sharp but steady. 25 years of police work showed in her precise movements as she guided him through the shadows. James's heart pounded so hard he could barely hear the approaching footsteps. "I can't leave you here. You have to." Marian's face hardened with determination. "Iris trusted you with the truth. That matters more than either of us right now." The beam of a flashlight swept across the wall near them. Voices called out from the front room. "Clear! Moving to the next sector." Marian shoved James toward the back door, her movements quick but controlled. The door's hinges creaked softly as she eased it open just enough for him to squeeze through. Cold air rushed in, carrying the scent of pine needles and wet earth. "Run straight into the woods," she breathed. "Don't stop until you can't run anymore. Don't look back." James hesitated, one foot on the back step. "Sergeant Hayes, go!" She gave him a final push and spun to face the approaching officers, deliberately knocking over a chair to draw attention to herself. "Hey, over here!" The sound of her surrender played out behind him as James plunged into the darkness. Branches whipped his face as he ran, thorns catching at his clothes. Behind him, he heard the chaos erupting. Marian's voice raised in protest, the thud of bodies colliding, handcuffs clicking shut. "Suspect Hayes is detained," someone shouted. "Where's Caldwell? Fan out! He can't have gone far!" James ran harder, his lungs burning. The woods were thick here, the ground treacherous with hidden roots and loose stones. He stumbled often, but forced himself up each time, pushing deeper into the forest. Helicopter searchlights swept overhead, turning the trees into shifting mazes of light and shadow. Time lost meaning. Minutes or hours could have passed as he crashed through undergrowth, changed direction countless times to throw off pursuit, and finally collapsed behind a massive fallen oak. His chest heaved as he tried to catch his breath without making a sound. Every muscle screamed from the effort of running. The helicopter's drums faded and returned, faded and returned. Dogs barked in the distance. James pressed himself against the rotting trunk, making himself as small as possible while twigs and mud dug into his palms. He thought of Marian, tackled to the floor of her own cabin, of Iris bleeding in that alley, of his grandmother, who always said that doing the right thing came with a cost, but that the cost of staying silent was even higher. Dawn crept in slowly, turning the black forest to grey. The sounds of pursuit had grown distant, but James waited until full morning light filtered through the canopy before moving. His joints were stiff from cold and stillness. The borrowed coat was torn now, streaked with mud and pine sap. Using the rising sun to orient himself, he began the long walk towards the city. Each step was careful, measured. He stuck to the tree line when possible, ducking behind buildings when he had to cross open ground. The morning commute was starting. Cars filled with people heading to work, parents walking children to school, elderly couples taking early walks. Digital billboards flashed around the city centre. James's heart sank as his own face appeared on the screens, alongside warnings about an armed and dangerous fugitive. The photos were from his CEO days, clean-shaven, well-dressed, confident. Nothing like the mud-covered man now slinking through back alleys. He needed somewhere to hide, to think, to plan his next move. Most of his usual shelters would be watched now. As he turned down another side street, a faded "closed for renovation" sign caught his eye. The old Sterling laundromat. He remembered it from better days, when he had donated washing machines to help the owner serve low-income families. The windows were papered over, the door secured with a padlock that looked newer than the rest of the building. It took him 10 minutes to work the lock open with a piece of wire, constantly glancing over his shoulder. Inside, the air was stale and thick with dust. Abandoned washers lined the walls like sleeping metal giants. The floor was sticky with old detergent, and water stains mapped the ceiling in brown continents. James made his way to the back corner, where a pile of forgotten moving blankets provided some cushioning against the hard floor. His body felt impossibly heavy as he sank down, the events of the past hours crashing over him like waves. Marion was in custody because of him. The truth they'd worked so hard to expose was probably being buried right now by the mayor's people. Every ally he'd had was gone. As exhaustion dragged him toward unconsciousness, Iris's last whisper echoed in his mind. "Don't let them hide the truth. Promise me. I'm trying." He murmured to the empty laundromat. "I'm trying." His eyes closed as cold sunlight filtered through the papered windows, casting strange shadows across the dusty floor. In the distance, sirens wailed, searching, always searching, but James was already slipping into uneasy dreams, haunted by the weight of promises he wasn't sure he could keep. James jolted awake, his neck stiff from sleeping on the hard laundromat floor. Sunlight filtered through the grimy windows, casting long rectangles across the dusty linoleum. For a moment, he struggled to remember where he was, his mind foggy from exhaustion. Then everything rushed back. The raid on the cabin, Marion's arrest, his desperate flight through the woods. A low rumble caught his attention. At first he thought it was traffic, but the sound grew stronger, more rhythmic. Voices. Hundreds of voices, maybe thousands, moving closer. His heart rate spiked as he carefully crept to one of the papered-over windows, peeling back a tiny corner to peer outside. What he saw made his breath catch. The street was filled with people, a sea of bodies stretching for blocks. They moved as one, carrying handmade signs and chanting in unison. James pressed his ear closer to the glass to make out their words. "Free Sergeant Hayes! Justice for Iris!" The crowd was diverse. Young activists with megaphones walking alongside elderly church members, parents pushing strollers next to teenagers in school uniforms. Many wore blue ribbons pinned to their clothes. Iris's favorite color, James remembered. His throat tightened at the sight. Signs bobbed above the crowd. "Police reform now." "Truth for Iris." "Who killed Officer Brooks?" Some carried enlarged photos of Iris in her uniform, smiling that warm smile that had made her so beloved in the community. James's fingers trembled against the window. He hadn't expected this, hadn't dared hope that so many would stand up, would question the official narrative. The protest was moving slowly down the main street, right past the back of the laundromat. If he timed it right. Making his decision, James pulled the old coat tighter around himself and slipped out the back door. The crowd was so dense that no one noticed as he merged into their ranks. For the first time in weeks, he didn't need to hide. The sheer number of people provided perfect cover. A volunteer wearing a community peace marshal vest passed by, handing out more signs. James accepted one, holding it high. "Truth for Iris." The words felt right in his hands, like a promise being kept. The chanting continued, rising and falling like waves. But what caught James's attention were the quieter voices nearby. A group of elderly women walked together, their grey heads bowed in prayer. They wore their Sunday best: pressed floral dresses, carefully pinned hats, sensible shoes that moved slowly but steadily forward. "Lord, bring your light to this darkness," one woman prayed, her voice trembling with emotion. "Justice for that sweet child, Iris, strength for her poor mama, and wisdom for all those seeking truth." "Amen," the others echoed softly. James felt something stir in his chest, something he thought he'd lost during his months on the run. Faith, not just in justice or truth, but in the basic goodness of people willing to stand up for what's right. It reminded him of his grandmother, of Sunday mornings spent in her small church, where she taught him that faith without action was hollow. As the crowd turned onto Market Street, James spotted what he needed: an old payphone tucked into the alcove of a convenience store. He broke away from the march, fishing in his pocket for loose change he'd collected. His fingers shook as he dialed a number he still remembered from his corporate days. "You've reached the desk of Erica Valdez at the City Times." The voicemail answered. "Please leave a message." James took a deep breath. "Erica, it's James Caldwell. I know you have every reason to delete this, but please listen. Check Iris Brooks's AutoSync cloud account. She set up something big, something that could break this whole thing open. You were always fair to me. Please, just look." He hung up quickly, melting back into the crowd as police cars cruised past, their occupants watching the protesters with wary eyes. Miles away, in the bustling newsroom of the City Times, Erica Valdez returned from her lunch break to find her voicemail light blinking. She almost deleted it without listening. Her inbox was always full of tips and conspiracies. But something made her press play. Her coffee cup froze halfway to her lips as James's voice filled her ear. Her free hand was already reaching for her keyboard, fingers flying across the keys as she accessed police personnel records. If Officer Brooks had set up CloudSync for her devices, there would be a trail. Erica's eyes widened as data began populating her screen. "Oh my God!" she whispered, grabbing her jacket and car keys. "Oh my God!" The protest continued its peaceful march through downtown, voices rising in unified calls for justice. Somewhere in that river of humanity, James walked on, anonymous but no longer alone. For the first time since finding Iris in that alley, he felt the weight of her final request lifting slightly from his shoulders. The truth was still out there, waiting to be found. Erica Valdez's fingers flew across her keyboard, her heart pounding as she navigated through the police department's cloud storage system. 20 minutes of digging had revealed Iris's personal account credentials, carefully hidden in a folder marked Insurance. Come on," Erica muttered, clicking through folders. The office around her buzzed with typical newsroom activity, but she barely noticed. Her monitor glowed with promise as files began populating the screen. Then she saw it. Emergency Backup Tour Protocol. The folder was massive, containing weeks of automatically synced data from Iris's devices. Erica clicked on the most recent file, dated the night of the shooting. The footage began playing. Unlike the choppy public live stream, this was crystal clear. Erica watched, transfixed, as the scene unfolded from Iris's perspective. The young officer's breathing was labored as she stumbled down the alley, clearly wounded. Then came voices, rough, angry voices of men discussing their hunt. "Mayor wants her gone tonight," one said. "She's got too much on the development deals. Should have taken care of her when we first caught her nosing around the laundering setup." Another replied. Erica's hands shook as she fast-forwarded through hours of earlier footage. There was Iris, secretly recording meetings where the mayor's associates discussed moving money through fake construction projects. There she was, documenting serial numbers from bribe payments, every detail meticulously captured and automatically backed up. Then came the moment that changed everything. James finding her, cradling her gently, trying to save her life. Iris's voice weak but clear. "He didn't hurt me. He saved me. Holy Mother of God." Erica whispered. She reached for her phone with trembling fingers, dialing her editor's extension. "Jim, get in here now. This is bigger than Watergate." Within minutes, her small office was packed with senior editors and the paper's legal team. They watched the footage in stunned silence. The legal director nodded grimly. "Release it. All of it. Now." Erica's fingers flew across the keyboard again, uploading the full video archive to the paper's website. She crafted a headline that would shake the city. "Breaking. Officer Brooks's hidden footage reveals truth. Mayor's criminal enterprise, attempted murder, and James Caldwell's innocence." The moment she hit publish, her phone exploded with notifications. Other news outlets picked up the story within seconds. Social media erupted. The truth spread like wildfire through the city's digital nervous system. Downtown at the county jail, Officer Marcus Chen was scrolling through his phone during his shift, guarding Sergeant Hayes' cell when the alerts started flooding in. His eyes widened as he watched the first few minutes of footage. "Hey, Sarge," he called out, voice shaking slightly. "You need to see this." Marion Hayes approached the bars of her cell as Chen held up his phone. She watched, tears forming in her eyes as Iris's voice echoed from the small speaker, her final testimony vindicating everything Marion and James had tried to prove. One by one, the officers on duty gathered around cell block C, watching the footage on their phones. The evidence was undeniable. Chen's hand moved to his keys, then hesitated, looking at his supervisor. The supervisor, a 20-year veteran, nodded slowly. "Open it," she said quietly. "We've had the wrong person locked up." Across town at City Hall, Mayor Franklin Merrick was in the middle of a press conference, attempting to control the narrative about Iris's death, when his aide rushed onto the stage, whispering urgently in his ear. The mayor's face drained of color as he glanced at his phone. He stepped back from the podium abruptly. "No further questions," he snapped, turning to flee toward his private exit. But as he burst through the door into the back hallway, he found his path blocked by stern-faced men in dark suits, badges glinting under the fluorescent lights. "Franklin Merrick," the lead agent announced. "Federal Bureau of Investigation. You're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, money laundering, and corruption under color of authority." The mayor turned to run the other way, but more agents emerged from the stairwell. The hallway filled with the sound of handcuffs clicking shut as reporters' cameras flashed through the windows, capturing the moment justice finally caught up with the most powerful man in the city. Outside, crowds gathered spontaneously in the streets. People hugged strangers, crying with relief, as the truth they'd fought for finally came to light. On countless phones and screens across the city, Iris's voice continued to play, a final testimony that would transform her death from tragedy to catalyst for change. James, still hidden in the protest crowd, watched the news unfold on a giant screen mounted on the side of the City Times building. Tears streamed down his face as Iris's last words played for all to hear. "He saved me. Don't let them hide the truth. Promise me." "I kept my promise, Iris," he whispered. "We all did." The morning sun painted the city in hues of gold, its warm rays a stark contrast to the cold cement walls of the county jail. Inside her cell, Marion Hayes sat on the edge of her narrow bed, watching the morning news on the small TV mounted in the corner. Her normally crisp uniform had been replaced with standard-issue orange, but she held herself with the same dignity she'd carried through 30 years of service. The sound of rapid footsteps echoing down the corridor made her look up. Officer Chen appeared at her cell, keys jingling in his hands, a broad smile on his face. "Time to go home, Sergeant," he said, his voice thick with emotion. The cell door swung open with a metallic clang. Marion stood slowly, her legs stiff from days of confinement. As she stepped out, several officers lined the hallway, standing at attention. Some had tears in their eyes. "Your uniform's waiting in the changing room," Chen said softly. "And there's quite a crowd outside waiting to see you." 15 minutes later, Marion emerged from the jail's front entrance, back in her familiar blue uniform. The badge on her chest caught the morning light, restored to its rightful place. The roar that greeted her was deafening. Hundreds of people packed the street, community members, fellow officers, church groups, students, all cheering and waving signs. "Justice prevails," read one. "Thank you, Sergeant Hayes," declared another. The crowd parted to create a path, throwing flower petals and reaching out to touch her shoulders as she passed. Marion blinked back tears, maintaining her composure even as her heart swelled. Then she saw him, a familiar figure at the edge of the crowd, trying to stay hidden. James Caldwell looked nothing like the polished CEO from the charity event years ago, nor even the desperate fugitive who'd sought her help. His borrowed clothes hung loose on his frame, dark circles shadowed his eyes, and his unkempt beard couldn't hide how gaunt his face had become. Without hesitation, Marion strode through the crowd toward him. For a moment, James tensed, decades of running making him want to disappear into the shadows. But Marion reached him first, pulling him into a fierce embrace. "We did it," she whispered, her voice rough with emotion. "Iris would be proud." James's shoulders shook as he returned the hug, weeks of fear and exhaustion finally catching up with him. The crowd's cheers grew louder, people recognizing him and calling out words of support. 2 federal agents approached, their faces serious but kind. "Mr. Caldwell," the lead agent said, "we need to get you both to the press conference. The chief of police and the U.S. attorney are waiting." They were escorted to a sleek black SUV, the crowd parting respectfully. As they drove through the city streets, Marion pointed out the changes that had occurred during their brief imprisonment. Protest signs had been replaced with victory banners. Where there had been anger, now there was celebration. The police headquarters auditorium was packed with reporters and cameras when they arrived. The chief of police, looking humbled and aged, stood at the podium with the U.S. attorney beside him. James and Marion were led to seats in the front row. "Ladies and gentlemen," the chief began, his voice carrying across the hushed room. "We are here today to right a grievous wrong. Through the courage of Officer Iris Brooks, the dedication of Sergeant Marion Hayes, and the resilience of James Caldwell, a criminal enterprise that reached the highest levels of our city government has been exposed and dismantled." The U.S. attorney stepped forward, detailing the arrests. The mayor, 3 council members, several high-ranking officials, and the 2 masked men who had murdered Iris. The evidence was overwhelming, not just for Iris's murder, but for years of corruption and the false charges that had destroyed James's life. "Mr. Caldwell," the chief said, turning to face James directly. "On behalf of the police department and the city, I offer our deepest apologies. The charges against you were fabricated by corrupt officials to silence your company's investigation into their illegal activities. Your assets will be unfrozen, your reputation restored, and those responsible will face justice." James was invited to the podium. He stood there for a moment, gathering his thoughts, his hands gripping the wooden edges. The room fell completely silent. 3 weeks ago," he began, his voice soft but steady. "I was a man without hope, running from lies that had destroyed everything I'd built. Then I found a dying officer in an alley, and she changed everything. Iris Brooks could have died suspecting me like everyone else. Instead, she used her last breaths to speak the truth." He paused, swallowing hard. "I promised her I wouldn't let them hide the truth. That promise gave me strength when I wanted to give up, but I couldn't have kept it alone. Sergeant Hayes risked everything to help a supposed cop killer because she believed in Iris's integrity. Countless citizens marched peacefully, demanding justice. Iris's sacrifice exposed the corruption that was poisoning this city, and her courage inspired us all to fight for truth. Tears flowed freely in the audience as James concluded, "I don't want revenge against those who wronged me. I want to honor Iris's memory by helping rebuild trust in this city. Let her legacy be one of healing, not division. Thank you." The room erupted in applause. Marion joined James at the podium, and together they faced the cameras, their stance reflecting their shared journey from adversaries to allies. As the formal press conference ended, they were told a community celebration was waiting at the Methodist Church, where Iris had volunteered. They walked out of police headquarters side by side, no longer fugitive and pursuer, but partners in justice. The street was lined with people applauding. Children ran forward with flowers. Old women blessed them as they passed. A group of rookie officers stood at attention, saluting their sergeant who had taught them integrity couldn't be compromised. "Ready?" Marion asked softly as they approached the waiting car. James looked at the crowd, at the city, healing around them, at the future that seemed possible again. "Ready," he replied, and they walked forward together toward the celebration of truth's triumph and a brave officer's lasting legacy. The late autumn sun cast long shadows across the renovated community center's fresh brick facade. Where graffiti and decay had once dominated, hope now bloomed in the form of newly planted flowers and pristine windows. The sign above the entrance read, "Iris Brooks Center for Truth and Hope," in elegant bronze letters that caught the morning light. James Caldwell stood at the podium on the temporary stage, adjusting his tie nervously. 3 months had transformed him from a desperate fugitive into a respected community leader, though he'd chosen a path far different from his former corporate life. His hair was neatly trimmed now, his face clean-shaven, but his eyes held a gentle humility that hadn't been there before. The crowd gathered for the opening ceremony filled every chair on the center's front lawn. Local residents sat alongside police officers, children fidgeted next to elderly church members, and reporters discreetly positioned their cameras at the edges. The unity of the scene would have seemed impossible just months ago. Sergeant Marion Hayes stood to the side of the stage, her badge gleaming in the sunlight. She caught James's eye and gave him a subtle nod of encouragement. Their unlikely partnership had blossomed into a powerful force for change in the community. Together, they had spent countless hours planning this center, determined to create something meaningful from tragedy. "Welcome, everyone," James began, his voice carrying across the hushed gathering. 3 months ago, this building was abandoned, much like I was. But just as this community helped restore my life and reputation, we've worked together to transform this space into something beautiful. He gestured to the building behind him. The Iris Brooks Center will serve as a safe haven for inner-city youth, offering after-school programs, mentoring, and educational support. We've also dedicated a wing specifically for injured officers and their families, providing rehabilitation services and counseling. This is how we honor Iris's memory, by continuing her work of building bridges between law enforcement and the community. In the front row, Denise Brooks sat with quiet dignity, her hands folded in her lap. Though grief still lined her face, there was a peaceful strength in her bearing. She wore a blue dress that matched the color of her daughter's police uniform, and a small silver cross caught the light at her throat. James continued, his voice growing softer with emotion. None of this would be possible without the incredible support of our community. But most importantly, none of us would be here without the courage and sacrifice of Officer Iris Brooks. She believed in truth when lies seemed to rule the day. She believed in hope when darkness surrounded us. And she believed in me when the whole world had turned away." Marion stepped forward then, helping James unveil a large photograph of Iris that would hang in the center's main hall. The image showed her in uniform, smiling warmly, her eyes bright with purpose. The crowd applauded softly, many wiping away tears. As the applause faded, Denise Brooks rose from her seat. She carried something in her hands, a worn leather journal with a blue ribbon bookmark. Making her way to the stage with measured steps, she approached James. "Officer Iris kept this journal throughout her career," Denise said, her voice carrying clearly despite its gentleness. She wrote about her hopes for this community, her fears about the corruption she was uncovering, and her prayers for guidance. In her last entry, she wrote that she believed God sent people into our lives at exactly the right moment, even if we don't understand why at the time. James's hands trembled as he accepted the journal. Denise continued, her eyes meeting his with unexpected warmth. "She believed God sent people to finish the work she couldn't. When you found her that night, it wasn't by chance. You kept your promise to her, and now you're carrying forward her vision for healing this city." The emotion James had been holding back broke free. Tears streamed down his face as he clutched the journal to his chest, overwhelmed by the trust this represented. Denise stepped forward and embraced him, a gesture that spoke volumes to everyone watching. The mother of the fallen officer embracing the man once accused of her murder. It was a powerful symbol of healing and reconciliation. Marion moved to stand beside them, placing one hand on James's shoulder and the other on Denise's. Together, they represented the bridge between law enforcement, community, and family that Iris had dreamed of building. When James could speak again, he stepped back to the microphone. "This journal will have a special place in our memorial corner, where it can inspire future generations. But more importantly, its spirit will live in everything we do here, every child who finds hope, every officer who finds healing, every bridge we build between people who once saw each other as enemies. That's Iris's legacy." The ceremony moved toward its conclusion as city officials brought forward the ceremonial ribbon and oversized scissors. James invited Denise and Marion to join him in cutting it together. The three of them gripped the scissors handles, and with a single synchronized motion, the blue ribbon fluttered to the ground. Applause rose around them, swelling into a standing ovation. Children released blue and white balloons into the autumn sky. The doors of the Iris Brooks Center stood open, ready to welcome its first visitors into a space dedicated to truth, hope, and the power of unshakable faith in human goodness. Church bells rang out from nearby steeples, their joyful pealing mixing with the applause. James stood between Marion and Denise, Iris's journal still pressed against his heart, watching as people began moving toward the center's entrance. The morning sun caught the bronze letters of the sign, making them shine like a beacon of hope for the entire city. The late afternoon sun painted golden streaks across the Iris Brooks Center's polished floors, warming the bustling community space with both light and laughter. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, spring flowers nodded in the gentle breeze, their colors matching the cheerful decorations that adorned the walls for the center's first major community gathering. In the main hall, the aroma of home-cooked food wafted from long tables where volunteers in blue aprons arranged steaming dishes. Mrs. Jenkins, a 72-year-old grandmother from the local church, carefully positioned her famous sweet potato pie next to an array of other desserts, while beside her, 8-year-old Tommy carefully arranged paper napkins into neat triangles. "When I was your age," Mrs. Jenkins told Tommy with a warm smile, "my grandmother taught me the proper way to fold these. Some things never change, do they?" Near the entrance, Officer Rodriguez knelt down to let a group of giggling children try on his police cap, their parents watching with approval rather than the suspicion that might have colored such an interaction months ago. The barrier between law enforcement and community was slowly dissolving, just as Iris had dreamed. Marion Hayes stood at the edge of the stage, watching it all with quiet satisfaction. She wore her dress uniform, pressed and polished, but her usual stern expression had softened into something closer to peace. Her eyes kept drifting to the memorial plaque on the wall, where Iris's image seemed to glow in the afternoon light. The crowd grew steadily, filling the space with a warm buzz of conversation. Elderly residents from the nearby senior center sat in comfortable chairs, sharing stories with teenage volunteers. A group of reformed ex-convicts, now mentors in the center's Second Chance program, helped carry chairs and set up additional tables. Their presence was a living testament to the power of redemption. James emerged from his office, straightening his tie as he approached the stage. The months since the center's opening had changed him. Though his hair was still flecked with grey at the temples, the haunted look had left his eyes. He carried himself with quiet confidence now, at peace with his past and focused on the future. As he reached the podium, Marion stepped forward to stand beside him. The murmur of conversation gradually quieted as James cleared his throat, tapping the microphone gently. "Good afternoon, everyone," he began, his voice warm and clear. "Looking out at all of you today, I see more than just faces. I see stories of hope, stories of healing, stories of second chances." He paused, letting his gaze sweep across the room. "When I first came to this city, I was running from my past. I never imagined I'd find my future here." The crowd listened intently as James continued. "Some of you knew me as a successful CEO. Others first heard my name when I was accused of crimes I didn't commit. But the truth is, I never really knew who I was until the night I found Officer Iris Brooks in that alley." His voice caught slightly, and Marion placed a supportive hand on his shoulder. Iris believed in truth when lies seemed easier. She believed in hope when despair felt overwhelming. And in her final moments, she trusted me, a stranger, a fugitive, to carry forward her vision of justice. Sunlight streamed through the western windows now, creating a warm glow that seemed to embrace the gathering. "This center isn't just a building," James continued. "It's a promise kept, a promise to Iris, to this community, and to ourselves. Every time a young person finds mentorship here, every time an officer and a citizen find common ground, every time someone who's lost their way discovers a path back, that's Iris's legacy in action." In the front row, several of Iris's former colleagues dabbed at their eyes. Even the children had grown quiet, sensing the weight of the moment. "But there's something else we've discovered here," James said, his voice growing stronger. "We found that second chances aren't just about starting over. They're about becoming who we were always meant to be. My grandmother used to tell me that faith isn't just believing in something you can't see. It's trusting that light exists even in the darkest moments." He gestured to the diverse crowd before him. "Look around. Here's your proof. In this room, we have police officers and community members sharing meals together. We have seniors teaching life skills to troubled youth. We have people who society once wrote off now leading programs to help others find their way back." Marion stepped forward then, adding her voice to James's. "Iris always said that true change happens one heart at a time. She believed in the power of small acts of kindness to transform entire communities. Looking at all of you today, I'd say she was right." The late afternoon sun had reached the perfect angle to illuminate Iris's memorial plaque, making the bronze letters seem to glow. James turned toward it, his voice softening with emotion. "Before we share this meal together, I'd like to ask everyone to join hands for a moment of prayer, not just for ourselves, but for all those still searching for their way home." The room grew quiet as hundreds of hands clasped together, forming an unbroken chain of connection. Officers held hands with former inmates, Children linked fingers with seniors. Race, age, and social barriers dissolved in that simple human connection. James bowed his head, and his words carried clearly through the hushed space. Dear Lord, thank you for second chances. Thank you for the light that breaks through our darkest moments. Thank you for sending angels like Iris to show us the way. Help us to be worthy of her sacrifice, to carry forward her vision of justice and mercy. And help us remember that every day is an opportunity to begin again. A chorus of amens rippled through the room. As James opened his eyes, he caught the last rays of sunlight playing across Iris's plaque. His lips moved in a whisper that only Marian, standing closest to him, could hear. We kept our promise. The formal portion of the gathering complete, James stepped down from the stage into the waiting crowd. People moved forward to greet him, not as a former CEO, not as a cleared suspect, but as someone who had walked through fire and emerged with purpose. Children tugged at his sleeves, seniors patted his shoulder, and officers nodded in respect. The aroma of home-cooked food filled the air as people began moving toward the buffet tables. Laughter and conversation resumed, creating a warm symphony of community. James found himself in the heart of it all, passing plates, sharing stories, and witnessing the beautiful reality of what had once seemed impossible, a truly united community. As the sun began its final descent, casting long shadows through the windows, the Iris Brooks Center hummed with life and purpose. In every corner, proof of redemption bloomed like spring flowers after a long winter. James moved through it all, finally at peace, knowing he had found not just purpose, but home. As the joined hands of prayer slowly dropped away, the gathering began to dissolve into smaller clusters of conversation and laughter. James stepped down from the stage, his shoes making soft sounds against the polished floor as he made his way toward the wall of windows where golden evening light painted everything in warm hues. Around him, volunteers moved with cheerful efficiency, folding chairs and clearing away paper plates. Children darted between the adults, their giggles echoing off the walls as they played their last games before heading home. Marian approached, her steps measured and sure, carrying 2 paper cups of lemonade. She handed one to James with a knowing smile, and together they walked toward the center's front doors to bid farewell to the remaining visitors. Outside, the sky had transformed into a canvas of pink and gold, stretching over the neighborhood streets that now held such different memories than they had just months ago. Gone were the days of James ducking into shadows and Marian fighting her lonely battle against corruption. The peace settling over the community felt almost surreal. A group of teenagers approached them, their steps hesitant but eyes bright with purpose. One boy, his voice quiet but steady, admitted, "I used to think there weren't any good people left in the world, but watching you fight for the truth changed my mind. How can we help here at the center?" James's smile was gentle as he responded, "Iris always said young people were the heart of this city. Now it's your turn to lead with courage." After the teens departed, James and Marian secured the building for the night. Their footsteps echoed in harmony as they walked to the parking lot, discussing their vision for the coming months, mentorship programs, legal aid workshops, and the scholarship they would create in Iris's memory. At his car, James paused, feeling the weight of Iris's journal in his coat pocket and the cool evening breeze on his face. How far he had come from those desperate days of hiding beneath bridges, flinching at every siren. Quietly he whispered his gratitude to Iris, to his grandmother, to the city that had given him a second chance as he drove home down the peaceful streets, his headlights cutting soft paths through the growing dusk. James felt not fear, but hope, the certainty that his rebuilt life would continue to serve a greater purpose, founded on truth. "Thank you for being here. If something in this story stayed with you, I'd love to see you again. Subscribe. And tomorrow, I'll bring you another story crafted with heart.